Okay, chapter 6. Leborn had food brought for us, and after I had eaten, he called one of his wives, who showed me to his sleeping place. There was a bare rug to step on, and a bed, not a pallet, raised off the floor as high as my knees. I was so tired, I didn't even try to sleep. I lay quiet, staring at the fire shadows. There was nothing to decide, for I had already decided. I waited until the two men went to bed and the fire died. I had taken off only my moccasins. I picked them up and made my way to the door. Outside, I sat down and put on the moccasins, which took some time because they were wet and had shrunk. A narrow path led through the village, and all the lodges faced it. I wanted to circle around behind them, but it was too dark, though a thin moon shone in the west. Before I had gone far, dogs began to bark. Two of them followed me, growling at my heels. A short way beyond the village, I heard a shout and the sound of hooves in the distance. The country on both sides of the trail was open. There was no place to hide. I ran for a moment or two, hopelessly, fearing that I would be overtaken, for Metaharta was miles away. The trail met the stream and followed along beside it. I thought of trying to hide in the water. Then I saw a row of bull boats pulled up on the shore. I chose the largest one, crawled inside, and sat down on the bottom. 3 horsemen rode by me at a gallop. One of the horses, the spotted one, belonged to Tall Rock. I waited for a while, then I lifted the boat into the stream and steered it close to the bank. The current took me toward my new home. A short distance before it reaches the village, the river narrows and the current runs very fast. Minatory bullboats are very light, made of buffalo hide stretched on willow frames or round as a ring. If you do not know how to handle them, they spin like feathers in the wind. I had seen them paddled, but it was the first time I had ever been in a Minatory bullboat. It began to go around and around. I clawed hard with my paddle to one side and then to the other, in front of me and behind, but still I spun in the fast water. I passed my village and went on spinning for half a league, and at last spun into the broad Missouri. I was so happy to have escaped from Leborn and Tall Rock that I wasn't even scared. In the slower current of the river, the boat stopped spinning. I steered toward the west, and for a while I thought I would reach shore. The boat caught on a snag, then floated safely away. But in the next 2 breaths, with an awful grating sound, it struck something hard. I found myself lying against a pile of driftwood, half in and half out of the river. My mouth was full of sand, and the boat spun away in the night. So the boat crashed against a huge pile of driftwood, and she fell out, and it just drifted away. I lay there too exhausted to move. At daylight, I crawled out of the water. I was on a small island with a wide stretch of brown water on both sides. The village of Metaharta was out of sight somewhere behind me. The island was flat except for a large hill in the center. I walked along the shore, which was littered with things washed down from above. It took me only a short time to circle the island, altogether about the same number of steps, as if I made a circle of Black Moccasins village. I climbed the hillock and found cottonwood trees, 9 of them, at the top, willows, 2 plum trees, a chokecherry tree, and a thicket of cactus pears. The view from here was the same as from below, a vast expanse of water, flat shores on both sides of the river, but no sign of life anywhere. It was a good place to build a fire. I had to build one to keep warm. Also, the rising smoke would let the people in Black Moccasins village know that I was on the island. I wanted them to come and get me and bring me back to the village. I had no fear that Leborn or Tall Rock would see my fire from the high bluff on the east side of the river, because the bluff and the land around it belonged to Black Moccasin. Leborn and Tall Rock would not dare to come there. 2 sandbars stretched out like arms at the head of the island. The river had run between them for a long time and left a great pile of driftwood on the shore. I gathered up an armful of dry branches, which I took to the hillock. I had made many fires in my life, but this one was the hardest of all. I needed a knife to scrape up a pinch of dust. I only had a deer's shin bone. Instead of a stick which I could twirl between my hands, I had to use the shin bone. At last I got the dust to smoke. At last I coaxed out a pale spark. Finally I blew the spark into a fire. By nightfall, I had a fire that could be seen from far away. I was not hungry and had no thought of eating, though there was some overripe fruit on the plum trees and green prickly pears in the thicket. Near the fire, I hollowed out a place where I was sheltered by the cottonwoods, and I lay down and covered myself with leaves. I watched the stars move across the sky. I listened through the night for the sound of a boat on the river. From time to time, I got up and put fresh branches on the fire. No one came. All I heard was the whimpering of nighthawks. I fed the fire throughout the day. While it burned and smoke trailed away on the cold wind, I went off looking for food that could be smoked over the fire. I circled the island and saw shoals of small silverfish and one big fish, half as big as I was, black on top and white underneath, with yellow eyes and long feelers on each side of its mouth. It was friendly, letting me even get within arm's length. I had caught riverfish often in Shoshone country, being very patient, putting out a hand slowly, then clamping down. But this one backed away and disappeared in the dark water. I thought there might be squirrels in the thicket, possibly rabbits, but I found nothing except 3 prairie dog burrows. Each held a store of good roots, but since the roots were their food for the long winter, I didn't want to take them. I still believed that my fire would be seen at night or the smoke in the daytime by someone passing along the bluffs. After these 2 days, when I had little to eat, I built a weir out of willow branches at the place where the river met the island, but the current was too strong and sent the weir floating away. It was at dusk when this happened. I felt like weeping, but as I watched the weir float down the river, I looked up and saw the evening star sparkling in the west. The star was my talisman. It was the sign the Great Spirit had given me when I was only a child to guide and protect me forever. The Spirit had given it to me in this way and for this reason. It was the summer of my 6th year, and our tribe was camped where the 3 rivers meet. I was too young to know a friend from an enemy. To me, all people were alike. My family was sitting by the fire in our teepee talking. I was eating from a bowl of soup and had a spoonful to my mouth when I saw the shadow of someone standing near the doorway. I got up and went to the door and held out a spoonful of soup for the shadow to eat. The shadow belonged to an enemy, a Blackfoot chief. He drank the soup, then went back to his warriors who had surrounded our camp and told them he did not wish to attack us. The next morning I found a green stone shaped like the evening star lying in the grass where the chieftain had been. This stone I have worn ever since and have never taken it off. At dusk of my 4th day on the island, while I collected wood for the fire, I came upon the carcass of a deer deep in the driftwood. From the 4 arrows stuck in its back, I guessed that the wounded beast had fled into the river to escape the hunters, only to be swept to its death. The meat was rank, but when I smoked it, it tasted good. I had no way of making a bow, which was disappointing, but the arrow tips were metal and the wrappings were well-cured leather. I made a short fish line from the wrappings and a hook from the metal, and I baited the hook with a piece of my deer meat. I caught a string as long as my arm of the silver fish. So she caught a whole line of fish as long as her arm. That's a lot of fish. These I smoked over the fire and hung in the cottonwood trees with pieces of copper twirling in the wind to keep the ravens away. From the deer's hide, using an arrow tip to scrape it clean, I made a rough cape for myself. All of this good fortune was a gift from my talisman, the star that comes out at nightfall. I hope you liked chapter 6. The next chapter is chapter 7.